Welcome to Advanced Legal Research. This is the introductory screencast for week number 1. My name is David Holt. I'm the Research and Emerging Technologies Law Librarian here at Santa Clara Law. To give you a little information about myself, I've been a law librarian here at Santa Clara for nearly 10 years now. I am a Santa Clara Law alumni, so this is where I earned my JD. In addition to my law degree, I have a master's in library and information science with a emphasis in both legal research and government documents. My duties here at the law library include maintenance of our electronic subscriptions, administration of our institutional repository, scholarly communications work, so I do a lot of the promotion for our faculty scholarship. I am currently the liaison for our 3 student journals. And I also do quite a bit of reference and research work for faculty. So your first question may be, why are you taking this class? Well, in response to that, I would argue that legal research skills are vitally important for practice. Particularly during your first year, you're likely to spend almost half of your time engaged in tasks which are defined as legal research. Taking a single semester of legal research, as you did in the first year of LawRa, may be rather ineffective in terms of developing practice-ready legal research skills. Law firms continue to complain that the research skills of their first-year associates fall below their expectations, and they strongly encourage law schools to both encourage students to take upper division legal research courses, such as the one that you're taking now, or to revamp our first year legal research and writing program. Some results from a survey that were currently done in Chicago among major law firms indicated that legal research skills are vitally important for practice. 90% or nearly of law firm associates reportedly lack the ability to define or narrow issues with secondary sources. Nearly half of first-year associates could not recognize relevant sources, and this may be of particular interest to you that 40 to 80% of firms, now remember these are large firms in the Chicago market, require new hires to use print sources, and the primary reason for that is to save on legal research cost. While you're here in law school, you're probably giving very little thought to the cost that's associated with electronic legal research. However, once you are out in the real world and are engaged in actual legal practice, you'll quickly realize that Lexis, Westlaw, and Bloomberg cost money, and a significant amount of money. You may rack up legal research bills in the thousands of dollars after an hour of research. And so firms are particularly attuned to the costs that are associated with legal research and are making efforts to reduce those costs. One of the ways that they are doing that is to require first-year associates to use print materials. As you would imagine, print materials have an initial upfront cost, but there's no cost incurred with repeated use, unlike electronic databases. The text for this course. All the texts are going to be available online. There are no required textbooks. There is nothing to purchase at the bookstore. There will be, however, materials that will be placed on course reserve in the library. And those readings are optional. I'm not assigning readings out of those that are available on course reserve. Okay, as you know, this is an online course. As such, there is a web page set up on our Camino site. It contains all the presentations, the readings, any of the supplemental materials, the video and the screencast, such as the one you're watching now, and all of our exercises and handouts. I will be adding materials to this website throughout the semester. I would recommend that you visit the site daily. You are going to be doing all of your work essentially through this Camino site. Which brings us to our tour of the Camino site. This is our Camino website. This is the home landing page. An overview of the skills that you're going to be developing in this course. the course syllabus. You'll see that the three readings that I'm assigning are available online, and there are materials that are going to be placed on Course Reserve in the library. And then a little bit about our class policies and class assignments. This is a 2-credit course that's graded as pass, no pass. You will receive grades from me and responses on your work. However, there isn't a threshold as to below which an assignment will not receive credit. You will, however, have to complete all the assignments to receive credit for this course, and I'm going to be fairly strict on that. And so all assignments need to be completed and submitted prior to the end of the summer semester for you to receive a credit for this class. In addition to assignments that are going to be available here on the Camino website, which will include memo exercises, quizzes, and model research problems, I will also be assigning tutorials via the Kali website. If you haven't yet created an account on Kali, I strongly encourage you to do that today. The authorization code for Kali for our law school is here highlighted. It's SANTCL, and notice this is case sensitive, and then lowercase stu and 184. In addition to the syllabus, you'll also see all of our assignments and the due dates for each below. And I have this course organized by module. And so you will see the materials for the first week listed here. As we get closer to the second week, those materials will become visible. You may not, however, move ahead of the rest of the class and complete work that is assigned later in the semester. And so you will need to complete the work that I've assigned for week 1 before you move on to week 2, and so on and so on. Okay, again, a little bit about the homework assignments. I will be trying my best to mimic real-world research exercises in this course. However, some will consist of multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank responses. And again, we will be using Kali tutorials for some exercises. In lieu of actual office hours, as I understand that many of you are going to be off campus out of California over the summer, we will be doing virtual office hours via the conferences function on the Camino website. This conference session will run probably about 30 to 45 minutes and will include voice chat and screen sharing. It's entirely optional. I'm not expecting everyone to attend virtual office hours every week, but if you do have questions, concerns that you would like to address, I will be meeting at a specified time every week to enable that. Again, to reiterate class policies, this is a 2-credit pass, no pass course. All assignments must be completed. And now an introduction to, a very broad introduction rather, to the U.S. legal system. This is going to be material that you undoubtedly have already covered during your first year, but we're doing a basic overview here to get us on the ground running with the course. So the very basics. Basic parameters are determined by the Constitution, which we, of course, have we have a system of federalism that enables both the state and federal governments to enact laws. States have basic police and welfare powers. The federal government must work within their enumerated powers. We have the Federal Supremacy Clause, so federal statutes take precedence over state statutes if there is a genuine conflict. And of course, the American legal system has grown out of the common law tradition, and so law adapts and grows from court decisions, and we have a system of precedents. 3 branches of the federal government: legislative, executive, and judicial. I am going to go over more of the executive branch than you ever would have covered in your first year of LAWRA, and so we will be going over the administrative process, administrative law, and executive documents. A little bit on persuasive versus mandatory authority, a very important aspect in legal research. In terms of court decisions here, the United States Supreme Court, when it's a question of federal law, is the mandatory authority on all federal and state courts below it. For the federal circuit courts, decisions on Federal law are mandatory on district courts within the same circuit and are persuasive authority for other circuits. They are not binding on state courts, however. Federal district courts binding on specialized lower courts if within the appellate jurisdiction. The specialized lower courts would include bankruptcy. The Court of Federal Claims would be a lower specialized court, and there's going to be others that we'll discuss later in the semester. State Supreme Court. Remember, the State Supreme Court is the final authority on issues of state law, and that is true even when there's issues of state law before a federal court when it's hearing a state law claim under diversity jurisdiction. State appellate courts, when adjudicating state law, mandatory on lower courts. This does get a little complicated when it comes to California, and we're going to go into some detail with that next week. And then state trial courts, their decisions are only mandatory when it's reviewing a lower court decision, such as a county, traffic, or municipal court. A map of our California federal district courts and our District Court of Appeals in California. We have 6 appellate districts in the state of California, and our 11 federal circuit courts. Okay, now an introduction to some of the legal research materials that are produced. For legal research, we make a very important distinction between secondary and primary materials. Perhaps more important, this distinction is more important for legal research than it is in other academic disciplines. The reason why is because our primary materials are the law. And so primary materials include statutes, and so both the session laws, which are the compilation of statutes enacted during a particular legislative session, and codes, which are those session laws that have been organized by subject area. Regulations are a source of primary law, as are treaties and cases. Secondary materials are analyses, commentary, and etc., and they will include, and this isn't a comprehensive list, law review articles, so legal scholarship, treatises and hornbooks. The distinction between a treatise and a hornbook is primarily the audience. A hornbook is designed for students, and a treatise is for legal professionals. ALR, American Law Reports and Encyclopedias, and then we also have a whole array of practice materials that we're going to go into in some depth in this course. And so our loose leaf sets, our form books, our model documents, model interrogatories, contract drafting tools, those would all fall under practice materials. Okay, an introduction to California primary sources. We're going to start here with our California session laws. A session law reporter is a compilation of statutes that were enacted during a particular legislative session, and they are organized in the order in which they were enacted. You may have seen a reference to a California session law when you've looked at a code section and looked through the legislative history notes. For an example, we can navigate here to Westlaw, and if we pull up a code section, let's say the California Penal Code 192, which deals with manslaughter. And you'll see the code section, the short title for the code section, the actual statutory text, and then below that are your legislative history notes. And you'll see here that this code section was originally enacted in 1872. That's when California adopted the field codes from New York. And then it was later amended by a statute that passed in the legislative session that took place in 1945, and then in 1983, 84, 86, 94, 98, 2006, and most recently this year. If you click on any of these links here, the document that will be produced is the session law that came out of that legislative session. And so if we clicked on the link here for the latest chaptered law, which came out of the legislative session from 2014, it was Chapter 684. Originally, it was Assembly Bill 2501. If we click on the link, it's going to take us to the text of the session law. And then it will note the modifications that were made that are going to be reflected in that code section. So the session laws and the code itself are complementary. They work together. Remember, the session laws are going to be set in stone, and so as soon as the legislative session is ended, the statutes are compiled. There's no alteration to those statutes after that point. However, the code, of course, can change. They can change via subsequent legislative actions. And so this sample penal code section that I have listed here, if there was legislative action that modified 191.5, it would be included in the session law reporter for that legislative session, and then this code section would be modified. And that's the reason why we always put the date in a parenthetical after a code section citation. Remember, in California, we have two code publishers. They're both unofficial, and one is published by Deerings and the other by West. You must also note the publisher in your Blue Book citation. And I understand this doesn't make much sense why you would need to indicate the publisher here. That's simply the Blue Book rule. I agree, it doesn't make much sense. The code section text is going to be the same in either set, by Deerings or by West. Okay, the California Supreme Court reporter is called California Reports, at least the official reporter is. The California Supreme Court decisions are also published in West California Reporter, which will include decisions from not only the state Supreme Court, but also from our state appellate courts. And those decisions are also reported in the Pacific Reporter, which is a regional reporter. And I'm going to go into that in depth when we cover this in our second or third week of class. The California Courts of Appeals reporter, the official is California Appellate Reports. Again, they're also published as parallel citations in West California Reporter and the Pacific Reporter. And then California Regulatory Code, which you probably didn't encounter much, if at all, during your first year in law. But the California Code of Regulations is the compilation of regulations that have been adopted by state agencies. Much like the statutory code, it is compiled into titles and then organized into divisions. We have a administrative process in California that is very similar to the process that's been adopted by the federal government. Notice of proposed state regulations are first published in the California Regulatory Notice Register, which practitioners often refer to it as the Z Register. There is a notice and comment period after it's published in the register, and after the notice and comment period has ended, the agency makes a decision on the proposed regulation as to whether it will be modified, adopted, or rejected. If it is adopted, it will eventually, most likely, be codified in Barclay's official California Code of Regulations. Thing to remember is not all state regulations, just like with federal regulations, are codified. We're going to go over this in quite a bit of depth during the week that we cover administrative law. Okay, an introduction to federal primary sources. Much like the states, the federal government also has a session law reporter for federal statutes. They're, however, found in two different locations. We have the official set, which is United States statutes at large, and then there's also an unofficial publisher of federal session laws, which is called U.S. Code Congressional and Administrative News. It's often abbreviated as USCAN. You will have undoubtedly seen citations to these sources when you have looked at a federal code section and looked through the legislative history notes. Here's an example of a sample Blue Book citation here for the Health Professional Education Extensions Amendments of '92. Notice that there's always going to be a parallel citation here for federal session law. The first citation is to the public law number. which the two numbers here, the first represents the legislative session, and the second, the sequence in which the statute was enacted. And so this was the 408th statute, which passed out of the 102nd Congress. And the second citation here is to U.S. statutes at large. A citation to U.S. statutes at large operates in much the same way as a case reporter citation operates. The number which precedes the Blue Book's citation stem is the volume, and then the number which follows is the page number. If we go up to Westlaw, I can show you an example of a federal session law citation. Actually, let's go to the popular name table here. And I want to look for the Visual Artists' Rights Act. And you'll see this was codified in 17 U.S.C. 106A. So underneath the statutory text, you'll see the federal session law which created this code section. And so this code section was created by Public Law 101-650, which is also reported in U.S. statutes at large at 104-5128. The federal code, unlike California, we do have an official code for federal statutes published by the government. The code, remember, is a compilation of statutes currently in effect that are organized by subject. There are two annotated code sets for the federal code that are published by Lexis and Westlaw. And here's a sample Blue Book citation to the official code set. United States Supreme Court reporters, we have three case reporters that will publish decisions from the United States Supreme Court. We have the official reporter, which is United States Reports, and then we have two unofficial reporter that's published both by Westlaw and Lexis. The appellate reporter is Federal Reporter. There are, I think there are actually 4 series now to the Federal Reporter. A new series is created as soon as there are an excess of volumes. So there's really the only distinction between one series and another is chronology. And then for the federal trial courts, we do have a publisher, unlike many of the state courts, which do not have a publisher for their trial courts. And the reporter for the federal trial courts is the Federal Supplement, which is often called FSUP. And then for federal regulations, these are codified in what's called the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. And unlike the states, treaties signed with foreign governments are a source of primary law. And these may be cited in court documents and have the force of law when applicable. Okay, a little introduction to California secondary materials here. You have experience already with encyclopedias. California is a large enough state that we actually have a state encyclopedia. It is called CalJur, California Jurisprudence. An encyclopedia is going to be a very broad introduction to a legal topic. The entries are often going to be brief, concise, and pithy. It may be a great starting point, however, when you're completely unfamiliar with a legal topic or subject. A step up in terms of content from an encyclopedia would be Witkins. It's a rather unique secondary source in California. We have 4 sets of Witkins in California. There's a set on California criminal law, on evidence, on procedure, and then a summary of California law, which includes all your civil actions. Practice materials in California. We actually have 2 major publishers for practice materials in California. There's actually 4 altogether, but these are the 2 that you're most likely to encounter in legal practice. For the first is the Rudder Group, which has content that is licensed to Westlaw. And the second is called CEB, which is actually a nonprofit that's owned by the University of California, and they do not license their content to either Westlaw or Lexis. You have to use their own electronic platform for their materials. Lexis has California practice materials that are published under the publisher named Matthew Bender, which I should have included in this list, and you will encounter those practice materials on Lexis. Form books. There's lots of other secondary materials here that I'm not going over in this introductory session. So in addition to the materials that we have already covered, there's form books, model jury instructions, there's monographs, which are distinct from treatises and that they're not intended to be updated. There's 50 state surveys, which are compilations of statutes on the same subject from all 50 states. There's bench books and handbooks, and there's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we look at federal secondary materials, we have encyclopedias. There are two national encyclopedias that cover federal legal topics. The first is American Jurisprudence, which is often called AmJur, and then the second is not used that very frequently any longer, is Corpus Juris Secundum, CJS. American Law Reports is considerably more substantive than an encyclopedia, but it's not nearly as thorough as practice materials. There are 7 series of ALR. There's ALR 1 through 6, and they cover both state and federal legal topics, so it's a national source. And then there's an ALR set called ALR Federal, which, as the name would imply, only covers federal legal topics. Treatises are single or multi-volume books that cover a single legal area. They're often named after their original author. And so you may have heard of Chisholm on patents, Nimmer on copyright, McCarthy on trademarks, Patry on trademarks, Milgram on licensing, Couch on insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these treatises are named after authors who have since died because they have been updated for so long. They have now been taken over by other authors and continue to be published under the original name. Legal scholarship. We're not going to spend too much time on legal scholarship in this class, and the reason why is because legal scholarship isn't actually used that frequently in legal practice. It's most helpful when researching emerging legal topics, and there's a wide range of authoritativeness in legal scholarship. Articles are considered more authoritative than comments or notes written by students, and work written by well-known scholars is far more respected than work by non-tenured academics. Federal practice materials will include Matthew Bender again, owned by Lexis. Westlaw produces federal practice materials, and then there's also the Bureau of National Affairs, BNA, and Practicing Law Institute, PLI. BNA, along with CCH, publish a lot of materials on insurance, securities, corporate transactions, labor and employment law, environmental law. So you're frequently going to see BNA and CCH in those subject areas. And again, we have lots and lots of federal secondary materials. So transactional forms, jury instructions, there's jury instructions for the federal courts as well. And we're going to cover all of those in quite a bit of depth as we move on into the semester. So again, welcome to Advanced Legal Research. I look forward to working with you throughout the summer, and please feel free to email me, post in our general discussions area on the class website if you have any questions about the assignments, quizzes, and materials that we're completing.